The commissioner of the U.S. Food and Drug Administration says he may fast-track a coronavirus vaccine before the completion of a phase 3 clinical trial. Dr. Stephen Hahn's comments came about a week after President Trump accused the FDA of moving slowly to hurt him politically. Dr. John LaPook spoke to Hahn on Monday about the issue.
Tonight, FDA Commissioner Dr. Stephen Hahn insists the agency is not losing its independence when it comes to making a vaccine against COVID-19 available.
The public is concerned about the politicization of the process. President Trump tweeted about a deep state at the FDA. There are people in the medical community who are being critical of the whole process.
I can tell you our decision at FDA will not be made on any other criteria than the science and data associated with these clinical trials.
Dr. Hahn says depending on that data, it's possible a vaccine could be available by Election Day under an emergency use authorization program before a phase 3 trial is completely finished.
Have you felt pressured politically to make a decision one way or another?
I have not been pressured politically to make an incorrect decision.
How about pressure to make what you think is a correct decision?
I mean, there's been pressure throughout this pandemic, John. I think anybody who doesn't acknowledge that would be kidding themselves.
Some vaccine manufacturers have said they could start delivering vaccines by the end of the year.
If you felt pressured to make a vaccine available before it's ready, what would you do?
We will not make that decision on the basis of politics. That's a promise.
Would that promise go so far as to say that if you are pressured to make that kind of decision that you don't agree with, you would resign?
I think all options are on the table with respect. I hope we won't be in that position.
Dr. Hahn says the public should have confidence in agency guidance, which requires the vaccine be at least 50% effective. But even if some vaccine doses are made available in the fall, former FDA Commissioner Dr. Scott Gottlieb says widespread use is not expected until next year. Elaine?
Dr. John LaPook, thank you. And Dr. John Swartzberg joins me now. He's a clinical professor emeritus at UC Berkeley's School of Public Health and the editorial board chair of UC Berkeley's Health and Wellness Publications. Dr. Swartzberg, thanks very much for joining us. Give us some context. Approving a vaccine before the completion of phase 3 clinical trials, has that ever been done before?
No, it hasn't been done before. And it's very wise to even entertain the idea of doing it before. The reason why we have 3 phases of trials before a drug is approved is because we need to establish to the best of our ability its safety and efficacy. To truncate the phase 3 trial makes no sense at all. It compromises our ability to have a good degree of certainty about safety and efficacy.
And just a little bit further on that, so FDA regulations are, of course, in place for a reason. Remind us, what exactly is the overall process for approving a vaccine, and what's the significance in particular of phase 3?
Sure. So phase 1 and 2 are preliminary phases to establish that the vaccine looks like it's doing what it should do and there are no significant untoward effects. Phase 3 is where you have around 30,000 people. Many of them receive a placebo. Many of them receive the actual vaccine. So we can establish if the vaccine does better than the placebo. That's efficacy. At the same time, during phase 3, we can, by vaccinating that number of people, get a pretty good idea of how safe the vaccine is. You can't speed the process up. To establish safety, you're not going to establish safety by injecting somebody one day and asking them the next day if they feel okay, and if they say, yes, I feel fine, then the drug is safe or the vaccine's safe. You're going to want to wait a long time, as long as you can, to see if something comes up a week later, 3 weeks later, a month later. There's no way that this vaccine trial in phase 3 that Hahn is talking about can possibly be approved with any degree of certainty on a scientific basis in a truncated fashion, in a shortened fashion.
And so with that in mind, the FDA, as I understand it, requires a vaccine be at least 50% effective. Doctor, what will you be looking for if and when a COVID-19 vaccine comes out?
Well, I'll be certainly looking for the signs that it's a politicized decision, like everybody will be looking at. And that's a tragedy that I even have to say that. frankly, with other vaccines that have been developed and prior to this administration through the FDA, if a drug was approved or a vaccine was approved, I would have confidence the scientists there had given their opinion, and that opinion was followed. I don't trust that now, and that's a sad thing to say after being an infectious disease specialist for 45 years. So that's the first thing. The second thing is I'd want to look at the science carefully to come to my own conclusion. I'd want to talk with my colleagues who look at the science as well. That is, the results have to be published. We have to look at them, many people having their eyes on them. Once we have that kind of data and we can reach a consensus among the public health, medical, and scientific community, then I would feel confident. This is a process that takes a long time. Look at the fastest we've ever had a vaccine developed and approved was 4 years. That was the mumps vaccine years ago. Otherwise, the average is around 10 to 12 years to produce a vaccine. We're talking about producing a vaccine in months. It is doable, but it's really going to take a remarkable amount of work, and it's going to take a remarkable amount of trust.
Well, as you know, both China and Russia have signed off on vaccines before testing was completed. Is there a concern that these drugs could actually be dangerous, and how might we actually know?
There's tremendous concern, of course. The Russians have approved a vaccine for their population without going through any phase 3 trial and never publishing the results of what they said were a phase 1 and phase 2 trial. So there's no way we can know whether that vaccine is either efficacious or safe. The Chinese have approved a vaccine for their military, again without a phase 3 trial. So those are societies that I think approach the individual's welfare and life very differently than our society traditionally has and the West traditionally has. Frankly, I very much side with making sure that these products that are produced are safe and efficacious. China and Russia have not done that.
Well, Dr. John Swartzberg, it is certainly sobering to hear your perspective, but also incredibly valuable given your years of expertise in this very field. Doctor, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you.